Welcome to Fit With Us episode 30. I don't know if it was me that's introduced this one or not, but I've just had the conversation with Gary that apparently my intro music, and I'm claiming it as mine because I put the big spiel out it was going to happen, is going to take a little bit longer than normal. So unless Dean or Gary, you can hum a tune, then we're going another week without the intro music.
We're going another week without the intro music because it's too tight. But it is in the works, mate. It is there. It's happening.
I'd love to say that our guest today, Dean, was here just to create a bit of like a song and to hum the tune for us, but I don't think you're going to have the voice for it, Dean, are you?
I don't know about that, mate. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say I don't have a great voice, but I'm not willing to do it at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Put it that way.
Appreciate that. Yeah, what was I going to say? Gary, Dean, how are we today?
Rough.
Yeah, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Don't rub it in.
Gary got home from a stag. What time did you get home from a stag last night, Gary?
I got into the house at, I think it was 3 in the morning our time, 4 o'clock Spain time. So yeah, still feeling a bit tender. I made an ass of it
You're
this
still on
morning.
Spanish time. That just lets us know that it's not been that long ago.
So I made an ass of it this morning when I set my alarm because my watch is still on Spanish time, so I got up an hour earlier than I fucking had to.
Oh, disaster. Nothing
And I
worse.
came down and set the laptop up, and then I seen the time in the bottom of the laptop, and I went, "What the fuck am I doing?"
Yeah, disaster.
Better an hour early than an hour late, huh?
Absolutely. Aye, let's not talk about that time I slept through my recording.
Yeah, we just about got past that. That was a dark day for the parish.
Aye. As you can see, it's not my first experience, Dean.
What did you say? You fell asleep during the recording?
No, I was out the night before it, and I slept through the whole thing. I woke up to quite a few missed calls from Kyle.
Uh, I'd sent him on the link and there was no response. There was no, at the time I used to email him the link and I always got a notification when he opened the email, and it got to, I think it was 9 o'clock, there was nothing opened. 9:15, nothing opened. And I was like, I don't think Gary's coming today. So I was phoning him, I was messaging him, and then I was like, thankfully, I think it was AJ at the time I managed to rope in to do it. I was thinking about doing it myself, and then I'm like, I don't even want to listen to me chat, never mind anybody else. So, like, yeah.
AJ to the rescue.
AJ to the rescue, indeed. What was I going to say? Well, anyway, look, Dean, do you want to give a brief intro to yourself? Like, who is Dean?
Who is Dean? I'm on a journey of self-discovery. I don't even know that at the minute. But so this is our second time chatting, and the first time we were just basically introducing Mental Fitness, which is a social media page that I run at the moment, promoting positive mindsets and forward ways of thinking for people to navigate around in the modern world. A lot of what I put on there is down to my own anecdotal experience of life. Since then, I have become qualified as a NLP practitioner. I'm qualified in CBT and also as a life coach. And yeah, so today we're here to talk about my experience with PEDs and steroids within the fitness space. And the whole point of this is literally just to create awareness and education on the topic. So like I was saying to you guys before we started recording, we're not going to be going into the whole chemistry, pharmacokinetic side of things. Again, this is just going to be my own personal experience. And I just want to reiterate that everybody's personal experience is going to be completely different. So if there's anybody else out there who is maybe going through something similar to myself or has gone through something similar to myself, that is going to be specific to their own experience also. But we'll see where we go.
Class. Yeah, I think that's superb. Probably just get straight into it then. Probably a very open-ended question, but like what is your experience with performance enhancing drugs in terms of like what did you take, when did you take it, and what was the driving force behind it?
Yeah, so a lot of questions there. So I'll dissect it down as best I can. I'm going to give you two answers in regards to why I started. The first one is I wanted a boost in the gym. I wasn't seeing any results. I was sick of hitting plateaus. That's a lie. Because realistically, that's not usually the main reason that people jump on steroids, in my personal experience. It goes a lot deeper than that. It's a lot more deep-rooted. My particular choice for starting steroids, only became apparent to me years later. And it was down to the fact of just, I wasn't confident. It was just confidence was at rock bottom. It was coming from a place of, what could you say, a place of want. I wanted that external validation. I wanted to appear like the bigger guy and everything like that. And all this was doing was just trying to compensate for things that I was missing internally, to be quite honest with you. And I strongly do believe if people look deep enough, that is going to be a very, very common trend in regards to why people may start taking these performance enhancing drugs. Now, I'm calling them PEDs and performance enhancing drugs. They were never to actually increase my performance. It was always just to increase my physique. So what I've actually started to try and do is change the language around it now. It's body enhancing drugs. It's not, you know, performance enhancing, because a lot of the people who do it aren't actually in a competitive performance sport. Now, you can blur the lines there and say bodybuilding is a sport. Okay, I'm on the fence on that one. But yeah, they're physique enhancements, you know, and that's what it was for.
Can I just ask like a brief timeline then? When was it you first experienced steroids? Like how long ago would that be?
Well, let me see. So I'm 35 now. I first started when I was in around 20, and I started off just taking just kind of oral tablets. D-bol, Dianabol would have been the first go-to, which I think is pretty much everybody's gateway steroid into that type of thing. So and it was pretty easy. It was literally just a matter of going up to one of the bigger guys in the gym and saying, "Hey, what are you taking?" You know, and that sounds very simple, but that is how simple, how accessible that they are. You know, well, they are now, and they were then. I think it was maybe about a year of doing like a couple of oral D-bol cycles where I did actually put on size. And again, I'm getting to the point where I felt like I plateaued and need to kick it up a notch. I didn't plateau at all, because if I'm going to be quite honest with you, back when I first started steroids, I wasn't tracking my training, I wasn't tracking my nutrition, I wasn't tracking my sleep, I wasn't tracking anything. I had no particular metrics dialed in for me to justify saying, "Oh, I've hit a plateau, I need to reach for the next thing." It was always just a quick fix. What's the next quick fix? I want more of this. And
Were
that's a very
you
dangerous kind of cycle that people get stuck in. So yeah, I definitely started for the wrong reasons. But bringing it back, so probably a couple of oral cycles, maybe over the space of a year, maybe 18 months, and then I decided again it was probably time to up the ante and then move on to injectables. Now, at that point, I had a little bit of research done on myself in regards to injectables, because obviously it's a massive step. It's a very invasive thing that you're doing. You're actually injecting yourself. You're placing a foreign body into you. Do you know what I mean? So there was a lot more research done than previously. And what I found was it was a lot more of a cleaner source of getting anabolics into the system, because they're not going through your liver, your digestion, and everything like that. So as on one hand, as extreme as it does sound, there is a little bit of a lower risk in regards to internal health, in my kind of opinion, anyway.
and when you were doing the D-ball, were you just like going in completely blind? Were you cycling it properly, or were you just kind of winging it essentially?
Yeah, more than likely just winging it, because like when you say it properly, there was no proper kind of instruction given to me. It was just a case of, here's a box, take 10 of them a day. And that was literally it. So like I just kind of took my own initiative, and you might kind of break it down into 3 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, 3 in the evening type of thing. But yeah, it was there was never any strict particular guidelines,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing a deal in, you know, in the back of the gym car park. You know, they're not going to be giving you explicit instructions on how to take it safely. And that is a massive thing. Like, people who are dealing these steroids, at least back then, there was no proper guidance or instruction. There was no duty of care from anybody. It was just a case of, well, in my opinion, they probably just wanted your money. You know what I mean? Like, I have to say, I do think things have changed with the popularity of steroids these days. There is a lot more information on them. It's just down to people to actually apply that information. But however, in my recent experience, if myself or other people did go to reach for anabolics, there is a lot more, as I was saying, maybe duty of care from people, because I think it's starting to become apparent that with the malinformation that is out there, people's lives are being negatively affected. And again, that is the reason why I'm on here, is literally just to give my kind of side of the story and educate people of the serious negative effects that can possibly actually turn up. Now, some of those negative effects, so let's say the typical kind of negative effects of steroids would be gynecomastia. So that's bitch tits. You've often heard of people getting puffy nipples and things like that. I've actually had an experience with that years ago. Thankfully, it was only the one. And then again, it's like, where do you go? Who do you turn to? You know?
Did you have to get surgery for that, or did that go away?
No, absolutely not. It was never that bad. Although I do know two people in my personal circle of friends who actually had to have surgery and have that done. So like, people would laugh at that and go, "Oh, he had to get his tits cut off." It's like, but that's fucking extreme. Do you know what I mean? Like that's an extreme consequence for such a simple kind of decision that you've made previously, you know. So yeah, they definitely do have long-term lasting side effects.
Can I ask, when you first started taking them, did they, from like, because obviously we're going to speak about the negative effects of them, but from a positive point of view in terms of what you wanted from, did it actually do what you expected it to do when you first started taking them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Like, other people would see the effects quicker than I would, you know, and you'd probably be able to relate to this with people who are, you know, maybe doing transformations in the gym naturally, where it's quite often other people who recognize the results before the actual individual. So it's only when people started maybe coming up to me, up to even a few weeks, that's how short of a time that it took to take effect. Maybe a few weeks to a couple of months, people would be coming up and going, Jesus, you've put on some serious size on your shoulders and your arms. And that all that does is it just feeds that ego. And you just want more of that and more of that and more of that. I wish I could tell you and say, like, I had a particular goal that I wanted, you know, I wanted a step on stage for my justification of using it, but I didn't. It was great to get this attention that I so craved as somebody who would have suffered from, you know, low confidence, and somebody who would have been seeking that validation as a teenager and as a young adult as well.
I think the statistics actually say that. I think it's like 85% of people who take steroids are just your regular gym goers. Like, it's not athletes that, and actually, like, since knowing a bit from working in local gyms and stuff, you'd actually be surprised at the amount of people who are on them that you wouldn't think would be on them as well. They're a lot more rife than what you think you would. Actually, just on the same question, then, when you started taking them, obviously you said before the process you weren't tracking things in the sense of, like, your training might have been a bit haphazard, nutrition might have been. Did you find that when you started taking them, like, you were dialing in anything else, or was there anything else that changed, or was it just the steroids?
Just the steroids, just a different type of steroids, if I'm quite honest with you. Like, because I was taking the steroids and taking gear, I really didn't need to track anything, or I'm going to say I didn't feel the need to track everything, because what I wanted was going in the right direction, which was just an improvement in physique and muscle mass anyway. Because I was getting that as a result of taking the anabolics, I was getting away with getting shit night's sleep. I was getting away with eating whatever I wanted. I was getting away with overtraining. I was getting away with, you know, everything really. It allowed me to just really, just kind of push on without having to really dial in on the things that were really important. Now, there was a point where that kind of flipped on its head, where I did kind of realize that I'm absolutely neglecting a massive part of, you know, this whole kind of transformation here, where I'm just relying on the steroids. So yeah, maybe my food did get dialed in a little bit later, and I mean only as of recent, within the past maybe 5 years of doing things. So you do become a lot more aware of the importance of tracking food, sleep, recovery, and everything like that.
I'd say though, as a 20-year-old with confidence issues, just taking that one thing that is making you feel so much better, getting compliments and stuff, you must have felt for a large period of time great about, again, moving in a direction that you wanted to move. With like, from a physical point of view, definitely, but then from a like energy standpoint, because like when I may be naive on this, when I used to think when I was in my 20s, I was very tempted myself of taking steroids. I used to think like you're going to turn into the Incredible Hulk, where your energy is going to be great, you're going to look great, you're just going to be like this all-powering machine. How did you actually feel at the time?
I felt great.
Great.
Like, honestly, yeah. Like I was able to experience both the positive and the negative sides. The positive sides is when you're on. The negative side effects that come is usually on the come down when you either come off or try to come off steroids. So let's talk about the positives for a while. So the positives is you have obviously an increase in strength, you have an increase in muscle mass, you have an increase in sex drive, you have an increase in just an overall sense of well-being. Everything feels good. You have a sense of confidence, but I'm going to caveat there and say it's a false sense of confidence, because no amount of inner work is done in order for that confidence to come out. It's false confidence. It's confidence coming in the shape of a bigger outer shell, but still being that unconfident person stuck inside.
Yeah, I've had a business mentor in the past who would literally just take steroids because of the energy and drive that it would give them, just so they can be more productive. So
yeah,
it's not just from a physical point of view that you get benefits like.
No, like, and then we can touch on the things like, so with an average man, like your natural testosterone levels do start to drop off after a certain age. Now it is different for each individual, but let's say coming into your late 20s, maybe mid 30s, is typically around the time when your natural testosterone production will start to fall off naturally anyway. So what's happening these days is people who kind of fit that age bracket of, let's say mid 30s to 40s, I'm sure you're aware of the term TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. This is an absolute massive movement that's just going global at the moment. And I agree with it and I don't agree with it. And if you want to ask me about that, you can. So typically speaking, like people who use it for energy and use it for vitality, it's absolutely amazing. So you can absolutely, on that, I think it's the dose that makes the poison.
Yep.
So if you're running testosterone at a small dose and you're only replicating what you would be producing naturally, all you're doing is you're optimizing your levels. I've often compared it to maybe a female going through menopause who jumps on HRT, hormone replacement therapy. It's something similar for males, where their natural testosterone or their natural hormone levels start to drop. It's just a case of just kind of topping it up or making sure you're optimized. But absolutely, it can be life-changing in regards to energy levels, cognitive performance. There is specific steroids out there that will increase cognition. But that is only a byproduct of what it does. It's not specifically meant for cognition. But yeah, that's been my experience of it as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't actually realize there was several different types of steroids until about 5-6 years ago, and I felt so naive when I found out. I was like, there's different compounds that do different things. I just used to think that steroids were just the one thing that I thought it was like protein. I just thought it was like this one substance that you take.
Like typically speaking, from my understanding of it is like they're all kind of generally the same with slight changes in their chemistry. So again, I don't want to go into it too much because I'm afraid I've been misquoted and somebody, coming back to me. But there's any amount of steroids. Like even when you look at testosterone, which is the main one, like you have different esters, which means you have a fast release, a medium release, and a slow release of the actual chemical within your body. Then you can get into like the different types of testosterone. So there's Mastron, there is, it's never ending. And I think it's just a case of there's more being made as in like all you need to do is change a chemical component in that, providing you know what you're doing. Yeah, and you're just changing it from one form to another to derive a different effect out of it, really.
And make more money.
And make more money for all the drug dealers out there who are absolutely living it up on it. Yeah.
Right.
Do you remember Rich Piana?
I
Yeah.
do.
I remember seeing a breakdown of all the stuff that he was taking, and it was like, I think there was like 47 different compounds he was taking. I think he was taking Synthol, which is the one you inject that like it goes into your muscles and starts to separate your muscles from, like, expand your muscles from the inside out. It's
I
like,
don't know. Yeah, I don't know much about Synthol other than just I was just under the impression that it was just like an oil, like a filler, like yeah, like women get with filler in their lips, people would get filler in their biceps, or lads would get filler in their biceps. But yeah, that I don't even think is it classed as a steroid, or is it just classed as shite? I don't even know.
I don't think so. I think he had all steroid bases covered in one of the 47 compounds that he had, but then like to top up with Synthol as well, it's like you wonder why the guy's not alive anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
100%. Sorry, on you go.
What's that?
I thought you were going to say something there, Dean. Sorry, I was going to
Okay.
say what about the list of the shit that the Liver King's on as well when it came out? It was
I
like
didn't actually see the list, yeah, but like, come here,
15
I
grand
wasn't
a month.
surprised. Yeah, look, he wasn't pulling the wool over anyone's eyes, to be quite honest with you. Like,
To,
come on.
to be fair, actually, that's a point as well. You spoke about cost there. Was it expensive to keep up like steroids?
Not necessarily. Like, I mean, a typical bottle of testosterone, a 10 ml bottle of testosterone is probably going to set you back getting between 40 to 50 euro. And like, obviously, as I was saying, like the dose is the poison. Whatever your dosage is will determine how quick you go through that bottle. Like if you're injecting a mil a week, well, that 40 euro is going to last you 10 weeks. That's actually quite economical when you think about it. Now, you just also have to remember that you're getting that off, you know, like on the street, you know, or you're not actually getting that from pharmaceuticals or anything like that.
Cheaper than protein.
It is. It absolutely, and that's the absolute sickening point about it. It's so accessible, it's so cheap, and I think that's why it's so easy for people to just reach for it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's
100%.
absolutely crazy.
Especially in this day and age as well, when so many, like, especially so many guys, like, we're getting better at it, but we don't talk about how we actually feel.
Yeah,
So we just act rather than talk about it. And if like 99% of the time, guys that are, maybe not 99%, but guys that are on steroids do have that kind of underlying issue of not being confident and worrying too much about what other people think of them.
yeah,
So we always, us just being humans, we always look for the easiest option. We always try and take the easiest option. Sometimes that's spending 40, 50 euro every 10 weeks to take some TRT. And I think it's being promoted as well on social media a lot now as well. Like you see a lot of people kind of, even like teenagers and stuff. I think you've got on TikTok the guys called the Trend Twins, and
yeah,
they're just promoting it. They're all for it. I know a couple of guys that I used to work with, a couple of coaches who, in their stories, this was today's dose, and they'll put up like tests, whatever else they've had, and I'm like, fucking hell, like, is that
yeah.
how
Like
bad it is?
I'm on the fence with that one because in a way, yes, they are promoting it and they have access to an absolute extremely wide audience of people who are susceptible to influences like that, as in just take this. But on the other side of it, I'm trying to see it as well. At the same time, they're being transparent. They're talking
True.
about what they're doing and they're talking about what their doses is. Because back in the day, like going back when I was 20 years old, so that's 15 years ago, it was all forums. There was no kind of, like I'm sure you remember like the forum days. We'd literally go in and you'd just be reading like old school bodybuilders protocols and you'd be trying to replicate that because you think by me replicating this, I'm going to achieve the same results that they had. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of information out there other than just what Joe Blogg's done in 1995 to train for his Mr. Olympia. Do you know what I mean? That was literally all it was. Where now you have access to social media and all these influencers who are evidently using steroids, but there are ones there who are a little bit more kind of transparent and authentic and saying, listen, this is the risk that you're willing to take if you follow me or take my advice. And to a certain degree, yeah, look, I take my hat off to them, but on the other side, I do think they're opening the door to kind of glamorize it a little bit. And
Yeah.
as I said, I'm on the fence about it. How do you feel about it?
It's a very good question. I've never experienced it, so I can't really answer from a personal point of view. But I agree with you with the transparency thing. I do completely appreciate the fact that they're being transparent. But yes, I think just because there's so many young boys on social media these days, and there's so many young boys who aren't confident, who do turn to the gym to feel a wee bit better, who do worry about what other people think about them.
Yeah.
I think promoting it, not even promoting it, but just glamorizing it, like you says, to them, who their body and their brain is still growing. It's still, what's the word I'm looking for?
They're not fully cooked.
Evolving, yeah, essentially. I think it can have a lot of fucking issues.
Well,
And
here's
it
the
can
thing,
cause a
right?
lot.
Here's the thing. So, in the past couple of days, just kind of leading up to this conversation, I was trying to do a little bit of research, and unfortunately, there's not a lot. So I'm not able to bring a lot of statistics to the table here, but there is one thing that I did find, and that was there was a noticeable sharp spike of increase in anabolic steroids being used within males from 2010. Can either of you guess what else happened in 2010?
CrossFit.
The release of Instagram.
No way.
Yeah. And guess what? That narrows it down to the time that I started taking it too. So
Jeez,
I'm not to say that Instagram is to blame fucking for steroids, but like it really did open, the kind of arena for people to start comparing physiques. Like people have actually said that Instagram is like comparison is the thief of joy, and Instagram is the flag for that. Because all it is you're exposing yourself to like your own body image consistently, and you're going to just start kind of picking holes in your body image compared to this guy who looks completely fucking jacked. Do you know what I mean? So I would absolutely 100% agree social media has had a negative influence on body confidence related issues. And I do think steroids kind of came in the back door there, and that's kind of where they took off.
It's an interesting fact, but at the same time, it doesn't surprise me. You know what I mean?
No, I absolutely agree with that. I'm not surprised, but it's definitely interesting, especially when I saw that. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, that's fucking man. I was thinking 2010 is too late for Facebook, so it's definitely not Facebook. I just wasn't expecting Instagram.
Yeah, and there you go. And Instagram seems to be like the social media app for not just influencers, but fitness influencers. I'm not on TikTok, so I can't speak for it. I don't use Facebook a lot, but what I see of either, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of kind of fitness trending related things. It's just all directed towards Instagram.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pointing the finger at Instagram here.
Aye, 100%. I'm pointing it with you. Fuck Instagram.
Yeah.
Kyle, you got anything to add?
The only thing I'd say about the transparency thing would be like it crushed my soul when I used to like read Arnold Schwarzenegger's like encyclopedia to modern bodybuilding. I used to follow it to the T, thinking it was just training 7 days a week and eating chicken, and that was going to get me looking like he did. And you know what? You get to a point where you realise that all of the people that give you that information at the time, because again, it wasn't like it was like nobody spoke about it. It's like you're getting advice from someone who's done something very differently. And my only thing on that is I'd rather the transparency. I've always said I don't care what anybody else does, providing they're transparent enough about it. Where I do think there's a duty of care when it comes to the likes of Instagram or anything like that. Don't think it's necessarily people promoting their pages, but it's probably Instagram and who they direct that to. I don't think that could be overly responsible for again, me at 17 years old, looking at all of these people. That didn't exist for me when I was 17 years old, when I was probably where I was most highly receptive to looking at any performance enhancing drugs was between about 17 and 22. That's probably the point where I was young and probably daft enough that I would have just done something without any education on it. But if I had Instagram now and seen some of the, like, from a strength point of view, I enjoy bench pressing, squatting, deadlifting. When you see people's numbers on Instagram sometimes, and you're like, I don't know if they're taking something, if they're not taking something. Like, I feel like everything should come with a disclaimer, like, this is what it is, and that's absolutely fine. But I think it's just the comparison thing then becomes even more kind of widespread when you don't actually know what something or somebody is taking and what they're not and how they're doing it, probably more so than anything else, which suppose moving the conversation on a little bit, you, Dean, talked about like everything goes well when you're on it. Everything, like from an energy, from a results point of view, it's only when you try to cycle off it or anything like that where the negative effects come. So with that, I'm making the assumption at some point you tried to come off it or you tried to cycle off it. Like, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, correct. Like, so again, you mentioned the term cycle, and that is a big kind of that's a word used in the lingo of bodybuilding where you're cycling on and cycling off. Now, I didn't necessarily know what that meant. However, all I knew was a cycle meant that it was never going to be prolonged. A cycle was, a cut off, let's say 6, 10, or 12 or 16-week period of actually using your steroids and then coming off. Now, I was always set up for failure because when I done my first probably 2 to 3 courses of steroids, I never used any sort of post-cycle therapy. Now, a PCT or a post-cycle therapy is what's advised to help your body come back to homeostasis, come back to natural hormonal levels, and still be able to retain the gains that you've made while you were using the steroids themselves. So without this PCT or post-cycle therapy at hand, one, I lost all my gains, but my testosterone absolutely tanked. Like, I mean, like dangerously low. So what that can feel like is major depression, an absolute hit in confidence. You're just completely emotional. You're an emotional wreck. Your sex drive is non-existent. You don't even want to fucking look at a woman. Your diet, as in things just go to shite. You don't sleep properly. You don't want to eat good food. You don't even want to train. So it nearly just changes you physiologically completely if you don't have that kind of bridge of a post cycle therapy. Now, because I was in the absolute pits of shit, the easiest thing for me to do was to just jump back on cycle. So I was looking at it more from a therapeutic side of things where I can't feel like this any longer. I'm just going to jump back on testosterone because I know I'm safe there. I know that's where I can just feel normal again. A couple of months later, it's like, okay, we're going to try and come off. And it's just that vicious cycle. And I do generally think that is where people will coin the term steroids are addictive. I don't necessarily think steroids are neurologically addictive, but they're addictive to the sense of they bring such a crash that the easiest way out of it is just literally to jump back on again.
That is fucking intense, eh?
Yeah, no, it is. It's rough, and I have to say, like, my moods were just like a roller coaster. And like, even talking to Kyle on our last conversation, going on about like how I was growing up with my confidence and moods and anger levels, like absolutely steroids played a huge, had a huge influence on my thinking and ways of thinking, and that's the thing that people don't think about. It's not just your physicality that you're changing everything. Do you know what I mean? It changes how you think, it changes how you act, and that becomes ingrained as part of your personality then. And you can just carry that with you for years until you actually realize, hold on a fucking minute here. Do you know what I mean? Things need to be actually, looked at. So like going back to that point, like, because I was in a vicious cycle of on and off and, I was up and down, I got to a point that I knew I needed medical intervention because no kind of street dealer is ever going to get me out of the shitstorm that I was in. So basically, that was me taking a massive step, going to the doctor, just my GP, explaining what I've done, and just looking for help, looking to go back to being natural again without having to experience this crash. So I have to say that's when my real kind of negative experience of the medical system kind of happened, because they just don't know enough about it. They don't even know where to start. And to be honest with you, I was actually demonized because I nearly felt like I was going in, like, let's say you go into your doctor and you say, okay, doc, I've been on heroin for the past 5 years. I'd like to come off. And the doctor scoffs at you, laughs at you, and just say, well, that's the consequences of your actions, son, isn't it? It kind of led me to think, right, these guys don't have my best interests at heart here.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have it wrote down. This is actually an article that I was going to write 2 years ago, and I just actually read it this morning. I went through 7 doctors. Now that is between GPs, consultants, and specialists to find that one person who was willing and able to help me. 7 doctors. That's a lot of time, a lot of stress, and a lot of money that I had to go through just to find a doctor who, one, understood and knew where I was coming from, and two, understood and knew where I wanted to be within my whole kind of life and hormonal balances and things like that. So that's definitely an area that people don't talk about enough. You know, like one of the doctors just basically said, just go cold turkey. And I just looked at him and went, are you for real? I was like, I know what cold turkey is going to bring me. This is why I'm coming to you, because I'm trying to avoid that whole kind of negative crash. I said, is there not like a bridge that you can give me to bring me from A to B without experiencing that? So with me kind of digging my heels in after seeing numerous GPs, switching GPs, and I think about within 18 months, they actually, this is funny, the treatment that they gave me for low testosterone, can you guess what it was?
Testosterone.
Testosterone. So basically, every 16 weeks, I would go into the nurse in my GP's office and get injected with 4 mil of testosterone undecanoate, which is basically works out as a gram of testosterone spread over 16 weeks. Now, that's quite inefficient and it's quite dangerous. So going back into what I was talking about, the esters, you have your short ester, your medium, and your long-term ester. Testosterone undecanoate is a long-term ester, so you only need to inject every 16 weeks. But the problem with that is it brings you on a big, massive high, and then it drops off. So I knew through my own kind of use and experience with testosterone that this just wasn't feasible going forward for lifestyle, because I was on that wave either way. So the way I kind of justified it was, well, if the doctors are going to put me on testosterone, I'm just going to take things into my own hands and start basically going into therapeutic doses. And that's where things evened out for the better for me. Which was just kind of, as I went back to, it's the dose that's the poison. I just really just like nullified my dose to pretty much just trying to replicate what your testosterone or your testicles would produce naturally in a week. And a lot of trial and error, but that has been kind of the best results that I've gotten out of it.
How must, like, obviously you were going through what, 7 different GPs, doctors, consultants and stuff until you found the one that was willing to help. How were you, obviously emotions all over the place, mood all over the place? How did that make you feel? Did you feel almost like you were alone in trying to figure this shit out?
I did, because I felt like I was the only one that was willing to actually open up about it. Because when I actually went to, let's say, people in my close circle of friends who were also using testosterone, and explaining that this is the steps that I'm taking, and I did definitely feel very alone, because I was willing to go down the medical route, and not a lot of people are, because they're afraid of being either demonized or seen in whatever sort of light. Especially when you come up against the doctors who aren't necessarily supporting you. You do feel very isolated, and it literally was just a case of, right, I need to start taking things into my own hands here. So that's actually when I started doing a lot of research into what American and Canadian clinics were doing at the time, which was a lot of the TRT doses and the TRT clinics. They're a lot more prevalent now in the UK. I actually think there's actually some in Ireland as well, but it's a very, very strict protocol to get on or to get into those clinics. But yeah, it was an absolute roller coaster. Like, I was in a relationship at the time with my partner, and unfortunately at the time, I wasn't as upfront about my steroid usage in the beginning of our relationship. Again, because I was afraid of what somebody else would think of me. It really does put you in this isolated box, So as I was coming off, going back to, the bad side effects, being emotional, not, wanted to engage in any sort of intimacy. Obviously, that raised questions from her point of view. And that's another kind of factor that you need to take into consideration as well. Like if you're in a relationship and you're willing to put yourself through this, you need to be transparent with your partner and let them in, let them in, let them know what's happening. And that was one of the best things I ever did. Thankfully, she's awesome. She was completely understanding, annoyed, not the fact that I was using steroids, annoyed that I just didn't tell her. So it was great to have her on side then, because I felt less isolated. I felt like I had that little bit of support behind me then. But yeah, through trial and error, we did actually, the reason that, no, I'm going to retract that until you ask about it. Yeah, I'm backtracking on that one.
I was also going to ask about, if you don't mind me asking, like, for your kind of, from a mental health standpoint as well, before you opened up to your partner, how, again, with the isolation stuff, how was it really affecting your mental health? Was depression hitting hard? Or were you stressed all the time, worried? Obviously, your mood swings were happening too, but like from a really, really deep mental health standpoint of view, how were you feeling, and how were you feeling after you opened up as well?
All of the above. Yeah. So like completely feeling just low in myself, no drive, no kind of. This is another thing as well. Like steroids give you a sense of identity. You really identify yourself with them. And when that is taken away, you lose part of your identity as well. So that's another mental factor that was affecting me. So yeah, I would like 100% say my mental health was at rock bottom. And it was that there's reasons for that, for the fact of hormonal changes in the body. That's just going to happen naturally. I was just all over the place. I don't necessarily know internally what was causing that in regards to like what the name of the hormones was that was affecting things, but it's a shitty time. It's an absolute shitty experience to be in. And what I would say to people who are like, maybe, let's say people who have never used testosterone before in their lives and they're coming to an age, some of my friends have actually come to me and they were like, look, I'm feeling shit recently. I don't have energy to run around with my kids anymore. I'm losing motivation for the gym. I don't really have as much of a sex drive that I had 10 years ago. My wife's starting to question if I find her attractive and things like that. That is an area where testosterone might actually improve your life. But unfortunately, I just started way too early. You know what I mean? So I'm not here to demonize testosterone or steroids at all. I think they're absolutely fantastic if they're used in the correct way. And there is correct ways to use it. And that is from an optimizing point of view. I was just literally trying to be this dickhead, trying to be a force to be reckoned with in size, more than anything. Yeah, it's crazy.
I'd say what would fuck with me the most is the fact that you went to the gym and you were getting stronger and stronger and stronger and getting these positive feedback loops, feeling great. And then all of a sudden you're not changing anything in terms of the inputs outside of just taking this one substance. But then when you're not taking it and that dip is happening and you're going to the gym and you're still doing exactly the same things, but instead of getting stronger and stronger and stronger, you're seeing your strength decrease, your energy decrease. It's almost like that positive feedback loop for the inputs is now you're almost getting a negative feedback loop, which can then probably fuck with, again, as you touched on, whether you want to go to the gym or not. And I think from any point of view, the gym for me is a massive outlet as to like my own mental health. I've touched on a few times where like I need to have that as a source of decompression. Whereas if I found that you were like, it's like going to work and then having to actually pay to go to work rather than being paid, it's like it probably fucked me up a little bit. That would probably be the hardest thing for me, put myself in that position.
Yeah, it's just not nice, like again, there's 16-year-olds who are just willing to just hop on testosterone because again they're being glorified on Instagram and stuff like that. But it's just these type of conversations that they're missing out on. They're not aware of the potentials that are ahead of them. Now, again, going back to the point that my story is very unique to myself, I can't say that anybody who uses testosterone is going to go down the same route that I have. There's a lot of underlying conditions as well that can also determine if how things are going to go. Like, for example, I have a blood condition called hemochromatosis, which has a negative impact on testosterone naturally. Now, I only learned this subsequently. You know what I mean? So that is obviously going to have an effect in how my testosterone is absorbed and things like that. But again, that's it's not a one fits all.
Yeah, 100%. Do you mind me asking like all the different things that was you took, if there was many, or was it just a couple?
If I can remember going back now, like, so I obviously started off with orals. So the orals that I would have been taking were typically D-bol, Anavar, T-bol, which my understanding is kind of a mixture of both. They're pretty much the only orals I've done. You have your other typical orals like clenbuterol, which is just basically the fat burner, and what else is there's oral Winstrol, which is typically what people call a cutting drug. And then when we went on to the injectables, it was pretty much testosterone is pretty much the base that I've used for all cycles. Other compounds would have been Deca, Trenbolone. There's blends there as well that have certain kind of compounds of each, certain ratios of each type of compound in each as well. So yeah, a lot. Like realistically, if I was to narrow it down, I've probably used maybe up to 10 different compounds throughout my life. And there was a time there that I was using a lot of steroids for the fact that me and a couple of mates, we were going to a festival. And again, typically speaking, it's going to be tops off. You want to look your best. Like I was using over a gram of different compounds, just injecting into myself to try and appear larger to other males who I would experience in that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it always seems like that as well. It's like we are not trying to impress the opposite sex. We're trying to impress the same sex. We're trying to
yeah, well,
impress
like,
males.
yeah, like I'm glad you actually touched on that because it's not. I'm not going to say I was trying to impress males just before that's misconstrued, but
Yeah.
typically speaking, like the feedback that you get isn't off the opposite sex. It's
Yes.
not off females. They don't look at you and go, wow, look at your arms, are so big, or this and that. It's always lads who look at you and go, Jesus, man, you're looking good recently. You know, you're putting on a bit of size and things like that. And yeah, so if people want to start steroids for the fact that they think that they're going to get more flange, it ain't gonna happen, you know.
But like you see that exact thing on social media right now as well, and we'll mention Instagram again because that is bad for it. With the clients that me and Kyle work with, or a lot of the clients that I work with, so it's all like kind of, younger ladies to middle-aged women, and they're all worried about what other females think about them. It's
Yeah,
not what guys think. And then I feel like, yeah, for guys that want to take steroids, especially young boys, it is to make themselves look better to other guys. Not to
yeah,
attract them, but just to make them look better.
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
context is key.
Yeah. Yeah, Kyle, what we were just saying there is steroids to impress the opposite sex. It doesn't work. It's usually like I was saying to Gary there. It's usually lads that'll come up to you and pat you on the back and ask what you're doing or what sort of training split you're on or what sort of steroids that you're actually taking. But yeah, it works backwards.
I used to find that with powerlifting. I always thought like having a decent bench press, I'd have tons of women like after me. It's actually just guys asking, "Oh, what do you bench? What do you do?"
I can't imagine you'd be at Ridley's one night and some chick's just going to come up and go, "How much do you bench?"
Yeah, no. I think the first time I broke the 100 kilo mark on a bench press, I was like, I am unstoppable. I'm going to be like whatever. That didn't work out that way, sadly.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, that like in my kind of experience with powerlifting as well, that is definitely somewhere where steroids played a massive part. Now, I know you can go into your drug-free competitions and you're untested and things like that, but yeah, I don't believe that there's many people who are drug-free.
Can I touch on that from my own experience? Because I've watched and read a lot about drug testing, and to be honest, I think it's almost harder to fail a drug test than it is to pass one because the half-life of a lot of steroids in your system, if you're clever enough about it or at least know what's going on, you can make it look like you can pass a drug test pretty easily because it's so expensive, especially in sports like powerlifting. It's expensive to run a drug test, whereas there's not a lot of funding for it. So, like, I remember turning up to a powerlifting competition a couple of years back, and the guy who was in my division I was competing against, I mean, his shoulders just looked like, I mean, he had fucking biceps on his eyebrows. I was like, there's not a chance that this guy's not been on something at some point. But, like, You are right in one of those ones. It's like it's rife in most sports, and I think that's where it comes back to transparency. When you look at sports,
Mm.
for me, like when it comes to like bodybuilding, which to be fair, probably the three of us sitting here right now, because we work in the fitness industry to some extent, is we look at it and go, right, okay, they're clearly we've got a fairly decent eye or understanding that they are going to be taking something or supplementing with something. But when it comes to the likes of popular sports like CrossFit or like even to a point, like you look at gymnastics, things like that, where the body compositions are really good, and you've got some heroes. What it can do to you when you realise that they're taking things when they get caught, if they get caught, like it can very much put you in a position where you're confused as to what's actually going on. And my biggest issue, and again, I've touched back on this, is I don't have an issue with anybody doing anything, providing there's transparency. But for me, what steroids can do is validate bad training methodologies. So when you look at somebody and go, I want to look like that, if I was a general public and go, I want to look like that, and they're telling you, you just need to do this or you just need to do that. And I'm like, but the way that you got there is very different from the way that you're spouting. I have no issue with you saying this is what I'm taking and this is what I do. Absolutely no issue. Hence the reason I have no issue with bodybuilding coaches training bodybuilders, because I'm like, it's relevant. But for me, when you look at example, when you have a bodybuilder who's clearly taking a few things, haven't said anything about it, and is training Linda, who's never got off the couch, and all of a sudden you see her doing bicep curls in the gym, I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, what's happening?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that does my fucking tits in. I have a tough time accepting that there are certain PTs out there who are juicing, who just won't speak about it, or they'll claim again, get this body in 12 weeks if you follow this particular training and nutrition plan, but you're not actually, throwing in the fucking steroid protocol that you're throwing in on top of that as well. That's one thing that I am working through at the minute. It's just something I can't get behind, like anybody who's not transparent, who is using steroids for their own gain. It's just not something I can get behind.
Aye.
Like I'd like to think I was always transparent with my usage, even in the past. Now, it was never something I was outspoken about, but if I was ever questioned about it, I would never lie. Because I knew that the direction that this was going to go long term, and I was like, people need to be just educated on it. And that's why I was more than happy to talk about it. But there's people up there who would literally pure blindly, just no, I'm not taking anything. And lad, you're going home and you're just pumping yourself.
Yeah, I've witnessed it as well firsthand. Like one of the coaches I used to work with 8 years ago, he was a big boy, and he would be slamming Domino's pizza every night and stuff like that. And I'm like, how can you do this? What way do you train? And I was just new into the industry, so I was like, I was very naive. I was uneducated because the shit they teach you in that 6 week PT course is absolutely shocking. So I was getting in blind essentially, and I was listening to these people. How do you do that? What do you do this? I had one boy who was obviously taking steroids, had an obese, overweight woman doing calf raises. Just so she would feel sore, so she would feel like she's worked. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
yeah.
I'm watching these people and I'm going, that must be the way to do it.
Yeah, far too many people use, like pain as a metric to
Yeah.
growth and things like that. But yeah, no, like I've seen that before, like somebody who's overweight, getting them to do burpees or
Yeah.
box jumps, I'm just like, come on.
Yeah, 100%. I cannot get behind it at all. But now, 8 years later, the first one that I was telling you about, the boy that was slamming dominoes, he's now very open with it
Yeah.
on social media, and I'm like, fucking, I knew it.
Good.
I knew
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
But to
Yeah.
be fair, at least he's came full circle with it. Like he's open about it now. Like
100%, 100%. But yeah, it was tough to kind of get it out of him at the time. But then I don't know if maybe he felt like you didn't, and if it was maybe going to, be like isolated or demonized almost. So he's
Yeah.
kept it quiet a wee bit.
But it's like, how can we combat a problem that people aren't even willing to acknowledge?
Yeah, 100%.
The more kind of open, transparent conversations need to be had around the topic of steroids, I think, and not just to highlight the health and safety risks of it, but just the realistic expectations and outcomes from it as well. You know, because a lot of people put steroids up in a pedestal and think that they start taking steroids and it's going to solve all their physique problems.
Yeah.
It's not the case. As I was saying, I was taking over a gram of things. And I think the heaviest I've ever achieved was 86 kilos. Now, I'm 73 now. So it was a lot heavier than what I was now. But like, if you looked at a comparison picture of me then and now, there's not a whole pile of difference.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So again, real transparency needs to be discussed about that. They are not the be all and end all, and they're not to be put up on this pedestal, you know.
Can I just add on that as well? I think one of the reasons, in my opinion, that people can or not want to admit to it is there are people out there who naively will just go, oh, they've only got that because of this. And it's like, that isn't entirely true, because I'll go back to the point of, it blew my mind the day that I realised how many steroids there were, but actually how many gym members in the gym I was in who were on them. And then I was like, they don't look like they train, never mind take steroids, and have done for a long time. So there is a lot more to it. And I know that, Dean, obviously you touched on the fact that you weren't measuring or doing anything training-wise from a point of view where it was super structured, but you obviously were doing enough in the right ways. It didn't sound like you were sitting having like 5 McDonald's a day or whatever. So there does need to be an element of, like, there does need to be a consistent line of you doing the right things over time, whether it be intelligent or not. But I think a lot of time people can be demonized and go, they've only got that because of this. And that's not entirely true. And I think actually going into some of the risk factors that I might know about steroids would be the fact that, like, you are more susceptible to injuries as well, in the sense that your muscles grow at such a rate, if you do things intelligently, that you can gain a massive amount of strength over time. Whilst your muscles can grow, the joints and structures around them don't grow at the same rate, which is why you'll be more prone to bigger injuries, tendon issues, which again can fuck you up for life. And again, you've touched on the imbalance of hormones, the mental issues with that as well. And again, there's a lot of things that you need to navigate there as well, that things do need to, if you are, what I'd like people to take away from this, and hopefully it does come across, if you are thinking about taking them, do it in an intelligent manner and understand the reasons why you're doing it in the first place, and understand there's people to talk to. Like Dean would be a great person to talk to about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that's one thing I'd like to say to anybody who is maybe considering it is, at the end of the day, do what you fucking want. I'm not your ma or your dad to tell you what you can or can't do. Like, people are going to use steroids if they want to use steroids. But the thing is, again, it is setting realistic expectations, knowing the safety protocols as well. And where was I actually going to go with that? Yeah, lost my train of thought. Sorry.
I've been there many times before, don't worry. But listen, see, speaking about the transparency thing as well, one person that fucking global superstar, The Rock, right? He said he took steroids once when he was 18.
Yeah.
Obviously,
did you ever see him? Sorry to cut across you. Did you ever see the picture of him when he was 13? He must have been taking steroids when he was 10.
He was a unit, wasn't he? He was massive, but now he claims that he doesn't take them. He obviously does, right? But he claims he doesn't take them, and it's probably because he's got all these multi-million-pound marketing deals and all that carry on. But he's still uploading videos to his Instagram and his social media of him training hard with like captions saying just work hard and stuff like that. So people, like, especially young boys, are going to think that's all I need to do
to
look like The Rock. And then when they don't get there, they think, what's wrong with me? I'm broken. Why am I not getting to that point? If The Rock can do it, or that sort of stuff. So he should be transparent. Oh, I know he can't. He probably can, but he probably can't at the same time. But yeah, people like that who have got such a massive, massive reach, they're the ones that I feel like should be being more transparent than, wee Joe Blogs who has 400 followers on Instagram. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think everybody has a sense, or should be responsible to a certain degree, especially down to the content that they put out.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I do believe that people with such a really wide reach of audience, they should, to a certain degree, kind of be responsible for knowing that what they say and what they do is going to influence other people to potentially do and say the exact same thing. And again, like, I mean, even me, I do feel that sense of responsibility to be able to just talk about my story, and hopefully other people would be able to, basically pick up something from it and make their own informed decision either way. As I said, people are going to do what they want to do anyway. But the more that people talk about it, the more kind of different experiences everybody's going to have. As I said, it's not like one size fits all for everybody. So some people can hop on testosterone and maybe use it for a year, get great results out of it, come off and have absolutely zero side effects and retain all their gains. They're just the lucky ones. There's other people out there who might do the same thing. They'll jump on a course for maybe a year or maybe a couple of years of using, and next of all, their fertility's down the drain and they'll never be able to have a kid. So that's one extreme example from it as well. But they are realistic expectations that you need to, basically potentially expect.
Have you ever watched the documentary Bigger, Faster, Stronger?
Never.
Oh, that's gone back a while. I don't think I've watched it from start to finish, but it's definitely something that I've kind of seen bits of. Yeah.
Gary, have you seen it?
Never.
So it's Mark Bell and his
I have seen it. Yeah.
three brothers. So they pretty much starts off. It's a very similar conversation to what we're having at the moment about pretty much they all aspired to be the Hulk Hogan's, the like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone's back in the day. They were all into wrestling. Actually, two of them were wrestlers. There was an American family who were wrestlers. But they then discovered that obviously they were all taking performance-enhancing drugs, steroids at the time. And then with that, they jumped on to steroids. It was essentially a documentary. It's a very good documentary. It was about their battle with being on steroids and what it is. But one of the things actually opened up the wrestling side of things was the fact that there is rife with steroids, but rife with pain medications as well, because they're always essentially throwing each other about. They've all got bad backs, and essentially there's a lot of drug dealing going on just with that as well. Where was I going with this? Firstly, there's not a fucking chance. Whilst they'll never be able to prove it and never say it to his face, there's not a fucking chance The Rock's not on some gear. There's absolutely not a chance. I would say two things on that, though. The comparison thing. Like, my issue would be if I started taking steroids for me personally, because I know at times where worked a lot on where my own mental health has been, thankfully, for the last couple of years, has been at a good place, but I also know what its worst it can be like. I would think if I then opened that kind of platform to myself for comparison would be higher. Whereas I can look at The Rock right now and go, I'm not going to look like The Rock because I'm not taking steroids. And that puts me in a different place. Whereas I'm like, there's no chance that I'm also not black either. So there's not a chance I'm going to look like The Rock. But going into that as well, I think understanding that you shouldn't ever look like anybody else. Like you look at something that might be slightly more naturally attainable. Like let's look at fucking Chris Hemsworth, for instance. Albeit it's definitely on the gear too. But you looked at if that's the absolute epitome of human, like what that looks like, there's still about a 99.9% chance, no matter how hard I train, no matter how well I eat, no matter how much I recover, no matter what I do, I'm never going to look like Chris Hemsworth. And do you know what? I'm okay with that. But a lot of people, I think, as well, would look at somebody and go, well, they're only like that because I'd imagine The Rock is on a lot of gear. I'd imagine that The Rock probably has a few things going on there. But at the same time, even to look like The Rock, if you're taking absolutely everything, there's a fucking good chance that you're not looking like The Rock.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And like, I think another thing that people don't even consider thinking about is their own genetics.
Yeah.
Like, I've often been told, like, I have the kind of body type or genetics of someone who is suited to distance running. Now, let me tell you, after running that 10K a couple of weeks ago, I ain't suited to running 10K. But I'm definitely not suited to somebody who's going to be 16 stone of pure muscle. Like, I mean, look at my tiny little wrists. Do you know what I mean? I just don't have the frame to be able to support that. So again, like setting expectations for what you think your physique is going to look like after taking steroids, it's more than likely not half of what you think it is. So yeah, and I think that can be a dream killer for a lot of people, is just coming down to their pure genetics, which they have absolutely zero control over. Like some of the best in the world bodybuilders have absolutely just super genetics. You know, a lot of them were even natural bodybuilders who got in fantastic shape and then maybe hopped on gear first. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't always win the genetic lottery, and that just plays against us, unfortunately.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, you tend to find that, especially with, the algorithm and stuff working in social media. We're always seeing like the top 1% of physiques that's being pushed on us, and then that's what we are kind of seeing every day. It's in our head, right? That's what I want to look like, even though we know we'll never look like that. But young, naive people growing up don't know that because it's not talked about enough.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it's multifaceted, as I said. Like it's just not going to be a one size fits all for everybody. And as I said, like there's the good, bad, and ugly side of steroids. I'm not here to talk about either. I've experienced all three of them. And like I do generally think that steroids can have a positive in people's lives. Like they're really good from a health perspective. Like I'm pretty sure like Anavar was created for burn victims, for regeneration of cells and burn skin and things like that. A lot of cancer patients will jump on certain type of steroids to be able to retain muscle mass. So for those reasons, they do hold a positive. It's just unfortunately that people use them for off-label uses. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit on my high horse and say that I have never thought about taking them, and I also don't rule out taking something in the future. When you're talking about TRT, which you started off in the past, like at the start of the conversation, done a lot of listening to people talking about it and the effects of it and everything else. And I like, again, the conversation will be had between me and the wife, depending on like testosterone, actual blood tested, rather than just how I'm feeling. It needs to actually have some data backing this up. But I think when you look at even the likes of Mike Tyson, who's meant to be fighting, you look at it and you're looking at his training at the moment, and Joe Rogan was speaking about it, going, he actually looks like he's in his 30s again, and they're talking about testosterone replacement therapy, and they're like, yeah, but his testosterone might now be where it was in his like late 20s, early 30s, albeit his body isn't, but his testosterone, so he can train and recover slightly better. Now that would be the reasons I would be doing it, but I wouldn't be like I'd be doing it to be plus. It would be me just trying to be at the baseline of so I can function better. But again, that's a conversation later down the road, and again, that's why I'm wanting to bring it up. As in, like, it's not as you touched on, Dean, necessarily this is good and this is bad and this is what you should do and what you shouldn't do. It's like very much these are the thought processes that I would go through as well, in the sense that in the future I don't rule out something like that myself.
Well, one thing I would say to you, and this is super important, is get blood work done. Like there's so many people out there. I would say up to 90% of steroid users in the generic population, not professional kind of bodybuilders, but anybody who's recreationally using steroids, I can guarantee you they have not had one blood test done to see where their actual hormone levels are. I get my bloods done 4 times a year, and that is specifically a full MOT. That is testosterone, all sex hormones, everything like that. Because that is going to be your metric to determine where your levels are. And this goes back to, I think there was a big buzz last year around town where vitamin B12 injections were being given and sold to people as a health supplement to help combat depleted energy levels. But I'm just kind of going, well, how do you know you're deficient in B12? It's like, how do you know you're deficient in testosterone if you don't get it checked? So that is one super important thing. You can't justify jumping on testosterone or TRT by saying, my moods aren't great and I've plateaued in the gym a little bit and I just feel like my testosterone is low. You can't feel like your testosterone is low. You need to actually go in and get a blood test done and physically see where your levels are at. And that is super important. If you're not doing that, you're not being responsible, and you're, in my opinion, you're just using a lazy excuse to justify using steroids.
I feel like I've been tired since I came out of the womb, so I probably would need to get the blood work done before I done anything, but that would be the intention anyway.
I don't think my tiredness right now is anything to do with my test levels.
I would probably concur with that, mate. I don't think any amount of testosterone is going to make you feel better.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Right, I've got a quick question for you, Dean.
Yeah.
You still taking anything now?
Yes, sir.
Are you?
So, yeah, currently I am taking 120 milligrams of testosterone per week. And again, this is under the guidelines of doctors. So again, I went back to the point that I get my bloods done every 4 times a year. So that's every 3 months, every quarter. And that is enough for me and the doctors to be able to make sure that I am in not just an optimal range of testosterone, but a healthy optimal range. Like if I'm too low, I'm going to start feeling the side effects of low testosterone, such as feeling shitty, no energy, bad moods, lower sex drive, terrible sleep. Where if I'm too high, you can actually start getting negative side effects as well, in the fact of gynecomastia, like I said, and that's down to the actual conversion of testosterone into estrogen. So, acne, people who are on super physiological doses of testosterone are more prone to acne. And that's also something I had to deal with growing up, not only as a teenager, but in my 20s, was extreme acne, down to the fact that I was on probably too much testosterone, to the fact that I had to get surgical intervention and get my cystic acne actually cut and removed.
Wow.
So that's another thing that people aren't necessarily aware of. Now, in saying that, I am going to put my hands up and say, as a young kid, I was always prone to acne before steroids. So that was always kind of an underlying condition that was there. But yeah, typically speaking, I think steroids would be classed with having acne. There does have to be an underlying condition there to a certain degree, but typically speaking, yeah, it's going to promote bad acne. And I'm going to give you an obvious one here: male pattern baldness. Now, don't get me wrong, like, you look at my dad and he doesn't have much more hair in his head than I do. So I can't say it's not all genetic either. But typically speaking, people who would use steroids kind of accelerate the male pattern baldness effect.
Wow. There you go. I knew about the acne, but I didn't know about the baldness.
It's not, now, don't get me wrong, it's not a telltale, but typically speaking, yeah. It tends to go that way as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
And let's not forget, there's also women out there on steroids. Like, I think that needs to be, talked about as well. I'm not the right person to talk about it, but I do know females who have taken steroids. And again, these are professional bodybuilders. These are people who wake up and go to their 9-to-5 jobs and maybe train in the gym maybe 3 times a week.
Yeah.
They're taking steroids too, albeit very different, because for a female to take testosterone at the levels that a male would take is quite dangerous. But there are other compounds out there that females are using.
Yeah.
So it can't just be demonized and say that it's all males. It's not.
Absolutely.
Can I touch on SARMs? Have you ever heard of, used, or got any experience in SARMs?
Yeah, so like SARMs seem to be this new buzzword in the past couple of years. So SARMs, for anyone who doesn't know, it's an abbreviation for selective androgen receptor modulators. Don't necessarily know what that means. I've just read it enough. But the only SARM that I would have taken was Ostarine, and that was for the purpose of improving I think it was my fitness, and it is known to kind of just help promote shedding body fat, as in getting lean. So I was big into jiu-jitsu at that time. And yeah, I just wanted more energy and to be lighter, to be able to move better. Personally speaking, I'm going to be honest, I don't think I got anything out of it really. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've done a lot of research on SARMs, because I think when they first came out, they were claiming to be steroids without the negative effects. Now, again, anything that claims to be something without the negative effects, there's always a cost to something at some point. It's just where it is. I think looking at it, because I had actually a few clients taking stuff at the time who were asking about it, I was looking at, again, always been interested in those type of things. I was like, I wonder what that actually is. So I think from the research I last read, now again, we are talking at least a year since I've actually dived into it. I think at that time, Ostarine was the only one that had been trialed on humans, because everything else had been proven, albeit that it was rats and mice, had been proven to accelerate the rate of cancers. They were highly toxic to the body. I think they were originally designed to stop muscle wastage. Like most kind of compounds that bodybuilders or performance-enhancing drugs are, they're designed for a different purpose, but then get used for bodybuilding or like body composition. But I think they were originally designed to stop muscle wastage in the first place. So I don't think they were massively anabolic or anything. It was more so just to stop the downregulation of muscle. But with that said, I think the bigger issue that I would have with anything, and I have spoke to couple of guys in the gym who take like the proper stuff that I was asking about SARMs at the time, and they were like, I wouldn't go anywhere near them, simply because like there's not enough research done. At least when you take a steroid, you know exactly what they're doing to a point. Like there's research out there, and it's been done for years at this point, whereas SARMs, I feel like and again, they are targeted. When I was having this look at them, it was like Facebook ads were targeting me, Instagram ads were targeting me. It was like everything was like, take, I don't know, was it LGT or LGD, or like there was like that, and then you've got Rad 140. It was like literally you can get them, I click a button, but like when you actually research into them, probably more dangerous themselves, like with less effect in terms of what you want than steroids. Like they've probably got more health risks with less of the positive effects. So I would say if you are younger and looking to take something, I'm not directing anyone towards it, but if you are going to do something that's been proven and there's a bit of research behind it, rather than go for them itself. That's my view.
Yeah, no, I can agree with you on that one. Like I actually think I remember the study that you've actually quoted there, and you were talking about it, Austrian being used in rats and things like that. And I think it was up to something crazy, like 35 times the dosage that you would actually be able to achieve in a human person. So yeah, the levels weren't corresponding to that, and I am aware of the study because again, I went down a massive rabbit hole. That's one thing with me, guys. I do my own due diligence subsequently, sometimes a little bit too late, but you really do have to go down a rabbit hole of really trying to read up on, information and studies and things like that. You must. It's your responsibility. That's it. You can't just sit and blame your dealer for not telling you these things. At this stage, there's so much information out there. At the touch of a button or at your fingertips, it's your responsibility to go out there and figure out what you're going to be actually putting into your body at this stage.
Yeah, and I would say as well, like also don't be ashamed to ask someone for a wee bit of guidance, a wee bit of guidance.
Like again, if you're 100% right, you shouldn't be ashamed, or nor should you feel embarrassed about asking somebody, because at the same time, all you're doing is you're trying to be more risk averse by gathering more information from other people. At the end of the day, people are going to do certain things whether you like it or not, but when they're best informed, that's probably the best case scenario.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, just reiterating the point, everybody just needs to start being a little bit more open and transparent about the topic. And I think that will help break the negative cycle of people not wanting to open up because they don't feel like there's any support.
Yeah, 100%. There is always support. You just need to, you don't need to know where to look, but you do need to look for it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, going back on what Kyle touched on, if there's anybody looking to get a further kind of insight in my experience, just reach out to me. There's no problem. I'm more than happy to talk about my mistakes so people can potentially learn from them as well, because I'd hate to think that there's any kid going through what I went through for 15 years unnecessarily, just for the fact that he had low confidence or, had trouble psychologically with certain things. If I was to talk to myself before I started doing steroids, knowing what I know now is do the work, do the inner work first before you start worrying about the physical work. Maybe you're a little bit too young at the age of 15 and 16 to start psychologically thinking about where you are in life, but definitely it is something that needs to be examined, because I genuinely believe people will go down this route for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, 100%. That's amazing. Thank you very much for obviously sharing your experience and stuff, Dean. Really appreciate that. And
you're very welcome, guys. I really enjoyed it. Look, it was an opportunity for me to get certain things off my chest as well. But yeah, look, just trying to promote and encourage conversations like this.
Is there anything else you want to add, Kyle?
Nothing. I was just going to ask where people can find you, Dean.
That's what I was going to ask as well.
Yeah, cool. So you can get me on Instagram at MentalFitnessLad, although I do have a YouTube page, MentalFitnessLad as well, which is falling behind. But yeah, if anyone needs me, just reach out to me on MentalFitnessLad on Instagram.
Perfect. Gary, you're going to stick that on, I was going to say show notes, but you're going to stick that on the notes, are you?
As always, I'll pop the Dean's Instagram profile link in the description and the show notes. So yeah, you'll get a direct link to it. I'll also stick your YouTube channel on there as well, so people can come directly to that for sure. Kyle, where can they find you?
Kyle_biofitness1 on Instagram is the place.
Excellent. And then for me at gmac_health and fitness. Now, again, I just want to say a massive thank you, Dean, because that was absolutely amazing. Thank you for, opening up, sharing your experiences, and for telling everybody else, if they want to reach out for a wee bit of advice, they can. That's amazing. Not a lot of people would do that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. I do appreciate it, lads. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can't add anything more to what Gary said. I think he said it very well. So cheers for coming on, Dean. Appreciate that.
Nice one, lads. Yeah, have a good weekend.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye. It'll be good to end this. Hold on, I've lost the button.